right. What is up, Play by Programmers? Welcome back to the Behavior Basics series. This is going to be part two. Today we're going to talk about variables. Now, there are a couple of things that you might refer to as variables when you first get started, but let's get some nomenclature out of the way so that the rest of this series is a little easier to follow. So, first thing here, we're going to look up here, we've got registers. Registers are variables that are exposed to the outside. They can be read or gotten from other programs or from other units that exist on the outside of your behavior. So these parameters are registers. These base registers that exist on your unit are registers. If you have, let's go look over here. You've got different components, and these components all have registers, right? This is a register, this is a register. And then you also have regular variables. And then down here, you can't actually see it there. I don't think I have any that show it on this particular playthrough. But then down here, you have arrays. And your array is something that is contained within your behavior. But your array is a 2-axis array. And so you've got IDs over here, which are basically just icons that you give. And then you've got indexes over here, which are your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so it's basically a list of lists, but that is the memory array. And then these little purple jobs right here are your variables. And so it's best to just always call these variables. If you want to refer to what is contained within any of these, right? You want to see what's contained within a variable or contained within a parameter or a register or what is contained within an array, then just call it the value, not the variable, because it's much easier to think of just these as variables and the things inside of them as values. And that'll help you quite a bit, I think, in trying to understand as you go through and learn more about different nodes. So let's take a look at just these purple jobs, just these variables here. So you'll see I've got quite a few variables in my behavior here. In order to open up this screen, you can go anywhere where there's a variable that needs inputting or outputting. So always on the left-hand side of a node is the inputs. Always on the right-hand side of the node is the outputs. And you can go to anywhere that it's requesting a variable, and you can take a look at these. And they appear in a lot of different places. You'll see that some of the information down here is actually changing based on which ones of these nodes I'm pressing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's really easy to open this up, and then you can take a look. You've got your registers here, right? Your parameters. You've got your base registers here. You've got your values here. So one of the most important things about these variables is that they are completely contained within this behavior. And what I mean by that is these variables only exist inside this instance of this behavior. So I've got a base build behavior here, and I can load that same base build behavior on any other building or unit that I want. And when I do that, what happens is a new instance of that behavior is created. And all the variables in it are completely unique to that instance. So whatever changes my engineer makes to these variables does not cross-populate to any of the variables that are the same in the same behavior on a different unit or structure. So that's very important. Variables inside of this behavior, right? These little purple guys are only here and now in this instance of this behavior. So you can do anything you want to values here, right? If you pull, this is a reference to self. So you can do all kinds of stuff to the information here, right? I can change the coordinate values. I can do all kinds of crazy stuff, but it doesn't affect the unit. It doesn't affect other units that might be running the same code. It doesn't, it's just inside of the behavior. It doesn't actually affect like the outside world. So go nuts, do whatever you want, do a bunch of math on some stuff. You'll be fine. You can't really break it. Now let's talk a little bit about some best practices. So normally when you create a variable, you'll see in here, whenever you do a variable, it gives you the next sequential letter as its name. That's trash. Don't do that. Because that will ruin your life. I have some some behaviors that have variables that go all the way up to like LMNO, all the way from A. So there's like 15 or 16 variables, and they're all named A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N. And by the time you figure out what variable you need, right, you'll be way over here with a node, and you're trying to figure out what variable you need to input into the input of that node. And you got to go all the way back through all of your code to try and figure out what variable you're trying to use. Don't do that. Right from the start, name them things. And it can be super simple, right? You can just name it the output source that it comes from, right? So I'm looping nearby resources here, and I am creating this variable for the first time right here to track this resource. Cool. Name it resource, right? That's what it is. This is the resource that I'm currently working with. Now, you could get real crazy with it, right? You could, also, by the way, right-clicking is how you go in to change the name. So you could get real crazy with it. You can make these names like as long as you want. Resource that I am currently working with for this behavior because I like to a lot. Ooh, with a period even. Let's get some punctuation in there. And then we look over here, and it only says resor, right? Because it can only show so much. But all you got to do is hover it, and it says resource that I am currently working with for this behavior because I like to a lot. Great. So name your variables. Name them whatever crazy, ridiculous thing you need to name them to be able to keep track of them. Because I promise you don't want to get 8 hours deep in building a behavior over the course of, 2 or 3 sessions, over the course of, a week. And then you get all the way to this node way over here, and you're trying to figure out what variable you're supposed to be inputting here, and all you have is A through Z. And now you've got to spend the next 45 minutes back tracing your code to figure out, oh my gosh, what variable am I looking for? It will drive you insane. So pretty please, this is basics for beginners, right? So if there's one thing you take away from this, name your variables. It will help you immensely. So the next thing about variables is variables in this game are dynamically typed. And what that means is you don't tell the variable what type it is. You've got numbers, you've got coordinates, you've got IDs. So things like this metal ore symbol is an ID. This is an ID. All of these, right? All of these little images here are all IDs. these are all IDs. All of this information stuff is all an ID. But it also has a number on it. So it's an ID plus a number. Your unit reference is all of the information about this unit, right? It's the unit type, it's the unit coordinates, it's the components attached to the units. It's all kinds of different things. So it's very, very dynamically typed, which can make it pretty difficult to understand what information you're working with. For example, this loop nearby resources here is going to give me a value that is an ID plus a number, right? It's going to give me the ID of the resource it found and the number of those resources, right? Because that's what it does. Scans for nearby resources in a power field or visibility range, loops over all resource types, and counts the total amount of each in the power field or visibility range. So it's going to give me the total of a distinct resource like metal ore or crystal. So this is the format that this variable actually exists in. However, if I didn't know that and I was trying to do these compares, I might just try and compare with just the ID, and I might not use the number value, right? I might take that to 0. And so now this kind of seems the same, right? I've got metal ore and I've got metal ore. And I might think, well, golly, that's going to give me an equal, but it won't, because these are not the same values, because this has no number attached to it. It's just an ID. So you have to be pretty careful about how you set that up, because otherwise things can get a little difficult. But there's all kinds of different ID types. There's all kinds of different compares and all kinds of stuff like that. So 9 times out of 10, what's going to happen is if your behavior feels broken, but you look at it and you think, man, this really should work, go back and just kind of relook at some of your variables and relook at where they're being instanced, where they're being created, where they're being altered, what information is in that variable, and then try and compare that to the other value that you're feeding in and see if maybe you've got something wrong there. Because about 8 out of 10 of the times that my behaviors break, it's usually these compares. And a lot of the stuff that goes on, the discussion that goes on the Discord, is also usually thinking and looking about these compares, because it's just really difficult to understand or to know explicitly what these values are actually representing. So keep track of that. And then, of course, if you have a type that needs to be explicit or static instead of dynamic, it will always tell you on the node that you're using. So specifically, this is asking me for just a number. So I can pass this variable in here, but this will break because that variable is a number plus this ID. So it'll either break or it'll use just the number part. Sometimes it'll do that as well. So you have to kind of know, what am I doing with those values there? So it just wants a number here, so just pass a number in. But those are usually explicit, and they're pretty easy to identify. You just have to understand exactly what it is that you're passing. For example, with arrays, a lot of the array stuff, a lot of the array stuff asks you for an index, and this can get really, this is something I think a lot of people miss, and we're going to go over this again in the memory array video. But an index is an ID like this metal ore, plus a number. If you remember when we were briefly going over arrays before, an array is basically a list of lists. So you've got your IDs over here, which are things like those icons. And then you've got your index value here, which is your number. And so when it's asking you for an index, it is always asking you for both of those things, right? It wants the ID value and it wants the number value. And the reason it wants that is because it's going to trace both of those, right? It's going to go left across or right across the ID, and it's going to go down from the index, from the number, and that's going to be your value. And so you can, in some cases, just give it the ID, and then it'll just create a new index value for it, right? Like this is an insert. So I can put just the ID in here and give it a value, and it'll add that value to the end of this list as a new index, as a new number. So if I had like metal ore 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I put this in here with no number value, then whatever value I put right here will become metal ore 5 because it has no value. But if you just put a number in here, if I just put 1, if I just put a 1 in there, then there's no ID, so there's nowhere for it to go. So it can't append anything, right? It can't add anything to the end of any of the lists. So when you've got indexes like this, you have to have the ID, but a lot of times you can avoid the number value, the index that goes with it. So you have to be a little bit careful about some of the stuff you're doing with this dynamically typed language, because it's really great because it's really flexible and it does a lot of stuff just sort of implicitly, like adding those values to the end of that list is super cool. But it also means that if you don't really understand why it's doing the things it's doing, then you can get confused. And then stuff doesn't always happen the same way every time because circumstances are slightly different. And then you can just really get out in the weeds and not really know why things are broken. So try and pay attention. Do a little testing. If something feels like you don't quite understand it, just make a random behavior and just start sticking some stuff on there and see what happens, and see if you can't work it out. Or, come to one of my live streams and ask me. I don't know everything, but I try to test and try to learn. So we'll learn it together. But yeah, I hope this helped you with the variables. It's a lot to take in, but if you can nail down the variable aspect of this, I think all of your behaviors will start to fall together a lot more easily. Now, the next video is going to be on registers, right? We're going to look at parameters and base registers and all the register stuff. And then the video after that is going to be arrays. And then the video after that will be faction registers, which are global registers for all of your units. So those are really interesting, and we're going to take a look at those. But yeah, next will be registers. So I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. If you got any use out of the video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And I will see you all on the next one.